My name is Albert Wesker. I aspired to become a leading researcher at Umbrella Inc., a pharmaceutical enterprise who covertly conducted bioorganic weapons, better known as BOW, for development. But at the Leader Development Training Ground situated in Raccoon City, I met a brilliant and talented researcher who made me decide to take a different path. William Birkin. In time, I shifted my position to STARS, a special forces unit of the Raccoon Police Department. Umbrella, for crisis management reasons of their illegal bioorganic weapons development, had many of its people working in the police department. I became the leader of STARS and conducted all sorts of intelligence activities for Umbrella. As I continued to serve, I devised my own plans and waited for the right moment to execute them. Then at last, opportunity knocked.
Albert Wesker is undoubtedly the face of the Resident Evil franchise, and we were finally introduced to the main man himself in Resident Evil 4's remake. Whilst I personally believe this Wesker is a downgrade to his Resident Evil 5 counterpart, the bigger issue I have with him is the prospect of the RE5 remake. This seems inevitable after what transpired in RE4's DLC campaign Separate Ways. The issue is, players who aren't familiar with the franchise or are playing the remakes as their first experience with Resident Evil don't really have any idea who Wesker is. He's one of the most iconic villains in video game history, but it isn't illustrated at all in the remakes. He kinda just shows up and you roll with it. You're probably thinking, come on Ed, everyone knows who Wesker is. And I think that's true on some level. People know Wesker the same way they know Darth Vader from Star Wars. Everybody knows they exist, but I know people who've been playing the remakes as their first dip into the Resident Evil pond, and trust me, they don't know a thing about Wesker. The last time we saw Wesker, Resident Evil 5, came out in 2009, which was 15 years ago. An entire generation has come along since then, and if they haven't played the previous titles, or God forbid watched the films, they're screwed. This would make RE5 a difficult experience for newcomers, so I think this is an interesting question to ponder. What remake should come next? I'm going to talk about the 4 contenders and their importance, and this should go without saying, but there's going to be spoilers. That being said, let's dive in. First up is Resident Evil 0, and I'm not the biggest fan of this game being a contender, but I feel we have to acknowledge and mention 0, as it's effectively where all of this starts. Although 0 is mainly about Rebecca Chambers and Billy Cohen and the horror they must survive, there are snippets of story that revolve around Wesker and William Birkin throughout the game. In fact, you could say the entire plot of both 0 and 1 happened because of Wesker's actions. Dr. James Marcus was assassinated by both men under orders of his friend and colleague, Oswald Spencer.
10 years ago, Spencer had me assassinated.
Oh, time to die, Doctor.
I will take over your research.
Wesker. Birkin.
This created a chain reaction 10 years later when the resurrected Marcus unleashed the T-virus on both the Ecliptic Express and the Spencer Mansion. 0 is a great way to introduce the stories of the Raccoon City saga to new players. You might be thinking that the game has too many flaws that hold it back, and I think that's the perfect reason it deserves the remake treatment. Tweak the gameplay, no more enemies such as Mimicry Marcus and Eliminator stun-locking you, dropping items being an absolute pain in the ass, and no item boxes? Come on Capcom. A remake would also do wonders for addressing inconsistencies and providing a better executed storyline. They could provide a better inventory and finally allow Billy to mix herbs, and away we go. This game honestly needs a new lease of life in my opinion, and it probably deserves better. But this video is about Wesker rather than the systems or flaws this game is known for. 0 might not be the most popular entry of the franchise, but is no less valid, and I think if they put great care into a remake for 0, fleshing characters out and providing quality of life, then it could be a lot of fun. It's important to provide a bridge of both nostalgia and modernity. However you feel about the game, this is where it all started, and every story has a beginning. I think Capcom have something special with the remakes, and given how much attention they've paid to characterization makes me all the more interested for 0, as I feel it really misses the mark. It would be great to see an improved Rebecca and Billy, and perhaps a Dr. Marcus that doesn't look like he's straight out of a Final Fantasy game. Most importantly, I'd be interested to see if they would expand or change any of the narrative as far as Birkin and Wesker is concerned. This game has many flaws, but one of the biggest for me is the fact that Bravo Team barely feature in a game that was supposed to be about them. It begs the question why they created a character like Billy in the first place when they could have had any member of Bravo Team as Rebecca's partner. Not that there's anything wrong with Billy. If we could get a remake with a much stronger focus on Bravo Team, it would make losing them so much more impactful in RE1. Which leads us to... Okay, so you might be thinking, we've already had a Resident Evil remake, silly, and you'd be right in saying so, and it was great for its time. But that time was 2002. I don't think anybody would say no to a Resident Evil 1 remake with the new engine and over-the-shoulder viewpoint. The remake of 2002 did a great job at expanding on the lore and introducing us to the likes of Lisa Trevor and Crimson Heads. The dialogue was still a bit cringe at times, but the voice acting was noticeably better compared to 1996.
Chris, you're okay.
Yeah, I think we got to the root of that problem.
These remakes are a huge opportunity to adjust the timeline entirely, and similarly to Zero, quell any inconsistencies with the story. The plot of Resident Evil 1 takes place during 1998, when a special police force known as STARS were assigned to investigate a series of murders. Bravo Team originally sent on site go missing, and to investigate that, they send in Alpha Team. Alpha Team is comprised of Chris Redfield, Jill Valentine, Barry Burton, Joseph Frost, Brad Vickers, and their captain, Albert Wesker. They find themselves stranded and are attacked by a pack of monstrous dogs. Frost is killed, and Brad flees with the chopper, leaving the rest of the team to seek refuge in a nearby abandoned building, the Spencer Mansion. It is eventually revealed in Resident Evil 1 that there is a secret underground lab containing Umbrella's experiments. Wesker is one of the 13 children raised by a scientist from Umbrella who bore the same surname. They were part of an experiment called Project W to create super soldiers. They were intellectually and physiologically superior to the regular human, and were all raised within the confines of the Umbrella Corporation. Most of these details can be found in the files of Resident Evil 5 and its DLC, but I think it's important to mention here. The player character encounters Wesker, who is revealed to be a double agent working for Umbrella, and has plans to use Tyrant to kill the remaining STARS members. During the ending of RE1, Wesker is seemingly killed by the Tyrant. Because Wesker was already genetically modified, he was able to hatch a plan with Birkin to stage his own death, using a super serum given to him by Birkin that would reanimate him much like T-Virus zombies, but enhancing his strength, speed, and agility.
When I awoke, hatred became my master.
Emergency. The self-destruct
I found the
system
tyrant that
has
killed
been
me was
activated.
dead,
All
and the
personnel
facility was just
must
moments
evacuate
away from
immediately.
self-destruction. I did not have time to enjoy my newfound life. I had something I needed to do.
As mentioned, Albert Wesker is the captain of STARS, and I feel this is important, but obviously feels a bit strange and out of place now if you've played the RE4 remake. You aren't exactly going to get that plot twist with Wesker, as he's already painted as the villain in the 4 remake, but I feel it's still valid all the same to give players an introduction to the character, his origins, and his motivations. STARS as a whole was a division of Raccoon City's police force created by Wesker, finding the best and brightest to be test subjects sent in to fight Umbrella's creations. And RE1 is of course where the Chris-Wesker rivalry begins, and we need both this and Code Veronica prior to a Resident Evil 5 remake to really add some weight and stakes to that. Going straight into 5 from RE4 with no backstory or context to Chris and Wesker is just going to feel really strange and hollow for new players. It's important that we go back to the Spencer Mansion one last time and really build up this grand finale. I think Code Veronica might be the most important remake to pursue in terms of Wesker. It wasn't the best game by any means, but I think similarly to Zero, that's the perfect reason to remake it. I think backtracking to Code V from RE4 might be a bit strange and a bit left field, but it's not a huge deal in my opinion. Code Veronica marked the return of Wesker, who was presumed dead as of RE1. It was Code V that reintroduced Wesker to the franchise as a next level villain. As mentioned in the RE1 section, Wesker survived the mansion incident with the serum, which has now granted him new powers. Wesker returns and leads a raid on Rockfort Island in search of the T. Veronica virus, and although unsuccessful, discovers Claire Redfield, Chris's younger sister.
Greetings. You must be the lovely Claire Redfield.
This game takes Wesker to a whole new level as a character and a villain. The story isn't exactly important or substantial outside of discovering Wesker's fate, but a second chance with a remake could benefit this story a lot. And of course, the game is very important in showcasing Wesker's new abilities. I said that Resident Evil 1 is where the Chris and Wesker rivalry begins, but this game sends it into overdrive, and the potential of seeing some of the cutscenes on the RE engine and planting those seeds for RE5 would be really great to see. There's a scene that I find interesting when Wesker is fighting Alexia Ashford, and he turns to Chris and acknowledges him as one of his best men before fleeing.
Chris, since you're one of my best men, I'll let you handle this.
Whilst he may hate him, I feel there was clearly a level of respect between them at some point. It's also a bit of a jab as Wesker runs away with his tail between his legs, leaving Chris to face the music with Alexia. I think another example of this is also showcased in RE1 when you finish the game and see the results page. It's almost as if Wesker is ranking you himself.
Chris, you did a fine job.
And that makes sense, seeing as the entire game is based on him testing the stars against the BOWs. Of course, the biggest talking point is their duel in Antarctica. Having discovered Chris and Claire, he realised he had an opportunity to eliminate them both. He initially takes Claire hostage, but is persuaded to give her up on the promise of a fight with Chris.
Well done, Chris. It turns out that Alexia's work wasn't much of anything. So now, the only thing left is revenge.
Let her go, Wesker! You don't want her.
Fine.
Claire!
Today's a good day. I came for Alexia, but killing you is even better.
It's here we see Albert Wesker in all his glory as he dominates Chris with little effort.
Sure, I'm not human anymore, but just look at the power I've gained. Magnificent, don't you think?
Chris eventually gets the better of him by dropping metal girders on him. With the facility close to self-destruction and his skin burnt by the fire, Wesker retreats. Can you imagine this fight scene on the new engine? Can you imagine the iconic Claire scene on the new engine? I have no doubt any changes they make to this game in a remake can only be a good thing. And whilst I mentioned outside of Wesker's fate, it's not that important of a title. No doubt they would change elements of this story in the new timeline. This game is vital before Resident Evil 5 in my opinion. Wesker is essentially Resident Evil's Thanos, and this game sets up those stakes wonderfully. The remakes so far have nothing to do with Chris, and that to me just feels bad. That being said, let's talk about 5. Resident Evil 5. Some might call this the start of Resident Evil's downfall, but this game is really a guilty pleasure for me, and that is mainly down to the good memories I have of the co-op play. Me and a friend will do a playthrough of this game almost every year together. It's like a ritual at this point. I think 5 is likely the destination given what we've seen in the Separate Ways DLC, and I think it's a fun idea and I'd love to see it, providing they keep the co-op in. I think that's very important. I still think 5 holds up very well today, but we live in this era now where everything is getting remade, and considering they've already foreshadowed 5, it seems inevitable. Whether it's next though is up for debate, and whilst I have an affinity for it, I don't think 5 should be next. It absolutely should happen. Just not yet. It's difficult because of the way Capcom have decided to go about things. I'm not surprised they did the order of 2, 3 and 4, but I feel they've jumped in with both feet and have forced themselves to present 5 next. And considering what a blunder 3 was in the eyes of many, I think it could be a bad idea if it's another thoughtless rushed mess. It's revealed in Resident Evil 5 that the Umbrella Corporation raised Wesker as part of a eugenics program, which offered him the best education but also indoctrinates him to develop in misanthropic views and a superiority complex. Project W, which I mentioned in the RE1 section, was revealed to Wesker by Oswald Spencer. These are questions that Wesker had been struggling with since his time at Umbrella. Seeing no more use for Spencer, Wesker impales him with a stab to the chest using an open hand. Immediately after, Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine, now working for the BSAA, show up to arrest Spencer. They fight with Wesker, who showcases his insane power levels, and eventually Wesker and Jill fall through a window to their presumed deaths.
Let's finish this.
Seeing that cutscene for the first time was unreal, and I can't even imagine what that would look like in the remake. This is what we've been working towards all these years. This is why Chris has been in the gym getting those gains, because how he went from this to that is just crazy. This is the final showdown, and I get why Capcom are excited to do it with the remake. This remake allows them to keep the good, cut the bad, and improve what needs improving. I just don't think 5 is the way to go right now because of the obvious lack of context with Chris and Wesker, and how flat that would feel for new players. This version of Wesker in the remake and his powers are not explained at all, and if I was a first-time player playing through these games, I'd be wondering who he is. What does he want? Why does he have all these powers in Mercenaries? Why does he have others do stuff that he can obviously do himself? I don't think riding on the original games is enough to justify an automatic connection of the dots between them. I just find it unthinkable that any new players would play this game and not question how ridiculous Wesker's abilities are with no explanation. I mean, look at him. He's dodging bullets and catching rockets. This man is unhinged. Wesker despises Chris Redfield.
I despise Chris.
Wesker would rather lose to anybody than Chris Redfield.
I can't lose, not to you!
Sheva is literally standing with him, and Wesker doesn't even pay any attention to her. She's almost like a bug to him. His entire focus is to defeat Chris, and he's going to use any means necessary to do it, even if that means destroying his own beloved body. We obviously get flashbacks with Chris, Jill and Wesker in RE5, and that might be okay in terms of facilitating this story with Chris, searching for his partner, but it would be a damn shame for players to not get the full experience and details from the other games. There is history between Chris and Wesker, and 5 wants you to know that. Shoehorning Wesker into the remakes just to push the narrative for 5 feels very cheap and lazy to me. Some people might tell players to just suck it up and play the originals, but I can't even get some of my friends to play the original Final Fantasy VII, and if they won't play that gem, I don't think there's any chance of them playing the original 0, 1 or Code Veronica. But I digress. It's an interesting idea to flirt with that perhaps 5 won't even end the same way as the original did, which could open a completely different door for the future of this timeline, because if we're being honest, nobody really wants Resident Evil 6, do they? That being said, 5 is surely in the pipeline, and I'm excited for it, but it shouldn't be next. In conclusion, it's a tough decision, and I think the way Capcom have gone about it timeline-wise is really awkward. I feel they've backed themselves into a corner and feel that Resident Evil 5 is the way to go, but I'm going to hang my hat on a Resident Evil 1 remake personally. I'd love to see what they could do with 1 with the RE engine, and I love the prospect of the third person over the shoulder going through the Spencer mansion. It's iconic and it has to happen. Follow that into Code V and then finally the RE5 remake. That makes the most sense for me. This way, we can build Chris up to be the big boulder-crushing hero we know him to be, and to see Wesker's hatred with him grow throughout the franchise, as well as seeing Wesker's obscene power level gains throughout the series too, of course. Resident Evil 5 with Wesker feels like the equivalent to Marvel's Endgame, and I think it's important the remake timeline gives us that feeling, rather than a ham-fisted 5 remake and then a flat backtrack to the previous titles. As for 0, I'm not writing it off by any means, and I think there's obviously a place for it in the remake timeline. It's important, and there's absolutely a story to be told there. I just don't think there is a demand or a sense of urgency for it. It's something they can put on the back burner. I think in time, we're going to get all of these games, and the order in which they release may not matter to a lot of players. I just think it's important people know the who, what, and whys. What do you think? Which remake do you want next, and why? Do you agree that Wesker should be explored more before a 5 remake? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I just want to shout out and thank Saki Chronicles for helping with the script and providing footage. Please do go and check out his channel and show him some love. His work is hilarious, and if you're a fan of Resident Evil, I promise you're going to love it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and subscribing, and I'll see you in the next one.